Mr. Rothschild.
Heavenly Father, come to you today on behalf of my board and commissioners and myself. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity you've given all of us to serve both our people, our Constitution, and you, the great Redeemer of the universe. Lord, we thank you for the blessings of your Son, Jesus, during this Christmas season, which is forthcoming. We thank you for the holiday season. We ask for blessings for people of all faiths and all beliefs, wherever they might reside across this great planet of ours. And Lord, we thank you, and I very much thank you, Lord, for the blessing of having the privilege of being born in America, the greatest country in the world. In the name of my personal Savior, I pray. Amen.
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 Flight to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And before we get started this morning, we are having public hearings this morning. If you hear about the public hearing, there's a sign-up sheet in the back. Please sign up in the back, and also there's comment cards that hand them to the county administrator. If you haven't done that already and you're here for the public hearing, please do those two things. We'll start with Positively Carroll. If anybody has anything they want to add for that, start.
I do have, last Saturday night, the Carroll County Veterans Independence Project had their red, white, and blue gala. First time they had a fundraiser to develop the Veterans Independent Project on Malcolm Drive. It was a huge success. A lot of people out, a lot of donations came in, and I think it's the first of many you're going to see is funding for the Veterans Independence Project, and I give the people who put it together a lot of credit. It was fantastic.
I heard they almost doubled what they expected to take in
Yes,
for
they
that.
did.
So that was really great. That's really good. Great outreach for the veterans. And I hope this project moves forward, because my understanding again is that the permitting process for the Army building is taking more time and more questions and all that kind of stuff. But
Hopefully by the first
they're
of the
working
year.
through it. They're working through it though.
It's at the federal.
Yeah.
The feds still have it.
They're hoping by the first quarter of the year to have that straightened out.
Yeah.
We've said that before, though.
Right. Right. They just keep getting more and more questions.
Yeah, that's. I'm not saying that anymore. Which year?
Anybody else have anything for Positively Carroll?
I just want to say last week I know there were a number of veterans activities over the course of the week. A lot of the schools do an excellent job of making sure that they take time out. It's always great, I think, when our students, our young folks, can hear firsthand from some of the folks that had the experiences that they did. And so certainly appreciate folks that put efforts into that. And I'll also give a shout out to Cub Scout Pack 883. I talked to a lot of Boy Scout groups, but not as many Cub Scout groups. And this was a very inquisitive group that asked me lots of questions, everything from how we make laws to the evolution of the Panama Canal. It was great. It was good to see them involved. So scouting is a great part of our community, and I appreciate all the volunteers, parents, and everybody else that contributes to making that program so vibrant in Carroll County, both at the Cub Scout and the Boy Scout level.
Did you get through all the answers? Okay.
I did, but I think some of them probably needed to be fact checked. So, yeah.
Luckily, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No. All right, then we'll move on to our first item, which is a public hearing, a zoning text amendment reducing the required BZA newspaper advertisements for Board of Zoning hearings from 2 to 1, and Mr. Burke will be handling that.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
As you know, the purpose of today is to elicit public comment on the proposed amendments to the Carroll County zoning ordinance. They were advertised in our Carroll County Times on November 1st, 2018 and November 8th, 2018. Just a brief summary, as you know, or as you may know, the land use article requires only that boards of zoning appeals fix a reasonable time for the hearings of the appeals, give public notice of the hearings, and provide due notice to the participants. Our zoning ordinance goes above and beyond that and requires us to advertise in 2 issues of the newspaper. The first notice must be published at least 15 days prior to the hearing, and the second notice must be published no less than 5 days after the first notice, nor less than 5 days prior to the hearing. In addition, we post a sign on the property at least 14 days prior to the hearing date. We give notice of the hearings to all adjoining property owners as well as the persons making the application, that is the appellants or the opponents, no less than 14 days prior to the hearing. What has been proposed is are two options to you. One of them would reduce the advertising requirement from 2 to 1 in our local newspaper. The other would eliminate it altogether. The Planning Commission took this issue up the other day, and they listened to both proposals and unanimously voted that the proposed amendment, which would eliminate the publication requirement, should be forwarded to you with a favorable recommendation. At this point, it's appropriate to open the floor to members of the public, and we do have some speakers. Oh, thank you.
Before you go into that, I have so you're saying the Planning and Zoning Commission forwarded to us to eliminate the newspaper requirement altogether?
Yeah, we presented
Okay.
the same two options that you have.
Just want to make sure I had that. Okay.
Yes, and they were in favor of eliminating the publication requirements, so long as we kept the other notification requirements and, of course, posted it, as we do now, on the county's website well in advance.
Okay.
But for the purposes of the hearing, what we put out was to be able to comment on either of those considerations.
Yes, there are two
Right.
options in front of you. One of them would eliminate the publication requirement. The other would reduce it from
Right.
2 to 1.
So people should feel comfortable speaking to either of those.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Our first speaker is Tim Thomas.
Here or back here? Good morning, Commissioners, and
Morning.
many thanks to you for the opportunity for us to be heard on this issue.
Sure.
My name is Tim Thomas. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Development for the Baltimore Sun Media Group. And the Carroll County Times is a very, very important part of our business, which is why I'm here today. I'm here to testify against weakening any requirement of public notice to our citizens. This includes not cutting them, in half, and it certainly doesn't include cutting them out altogether. There's a couple reasons for this. In fact, there's many. So first, we freely admit that we have a financial interest here, but it's not charity. The amount of money that's spent on public notice, I believe was $4,000 annually. It buys a very valuable service for government leaders, namely informing our citizens of upcoming government actions. And the mission of the Carroll County Times is to provide the local news and the advertising that Carroll County residents need to be informed citizens. And public notice advertising supports that mission. So that's number one. Just the public notices that are just in the paper are seen by 38,000 Carroll County residents. Second, measures like these tend to be sort of penny wise and pound foolish, because really it only takes one challenge from a citizen to offset any potential savings at all. And that challenge can come in the form of failing to provide adequate public notice. Third, today's climate really calls for more public notice, not less. The current notice requirements use multiple channels, and we applaud that. We just want to make sure that the newspaper is probably the most important and the most pervasive channel and most effective channel that government can use to inform the citizens. And then fourth, these proposed measures sort of point to the use of government websites. And most citizens don't spend their time scouring government websites for zoning appeal hearings. But they do read the Carroll County Times. And so it's true that our society is becoming more wired, and many citizens have internet access, but many do not. 13% of Carroll County households don't even have the internet. And if they're like my mom, they just use the internet to read email and look at pictures of the grandkids. And the people that don't have internet access are really the ones that need public notice the most. The composition of the people that don't have internet access, 81% are 55 plus, 78% have less than a high school education, 76% have a household income less than $50,000. So it's an important thing. And
Thank you.
my time's up?
Yeah, well, you have a closing sentence.
Okay. So I just don't want our citizens to lose their serendipity of being able to see a government notice by posting on our website and getting it out in the newspaper. So we're strongly against this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rebecca A. Snyder. Rebecca Snyder.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Snyder. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland-Delaware DC Press Association, of which the Carroll County Times is a member. Virtually all of the newspapers and associated news websites are members in the Maryland-Delaware DC region. And I just wanted to share some points about public notice. So public notice is the mechanism by which government informs citizens of pending actions that may affect them. And the way one gets out public notice historically has been through newspapers, and now in this day and age, it's newspapers and online. And our membership very firmly believes that it's important to make notice as widely disseminated and read as possible. Because when you're talking about zoning appeals, that's one of the most contentious issues around, because people are, you're going against the zoning code, you're looking for special variances, and it is the duty of government to make sure that those notices reach every citizen possible. And so it's commendable that that your current policy goes above and beyond what is required of land use. But I would argue that that is what you should be doing. You should be reaching out. And doing it through posting the sign on the property, that's great. That is wonderful and important. It is also important to put it on the government website. But when you're talking about how to reach Carroll County citizens about topics that are important to them, you go to the newspaper. You do that at a government level when you're sending press releases. You do that in a variety of ways. So I would urge not to roll back the requirement, certainly not eliminate it, and I would even argue don't go down to one insertion. Public notice, the gold standard for public notice, means that the notice is independent of government, that it is archivable, verifiable, and that it reaches the widest possible audience. Your newspaper is your partner. You wouldn't cut out the audience development piece of your messaging. You don't do it for anything else that you do. Why would you do it for something as important as zoning notices or other notices in general? So the independence of notice is critical because you want to make sure that that the optics are clear, that it's not government being manipulated, that the site is not being hacked or anything like that. And that's why it needs to be in print and online. So I'm happy to talk more about notice and what we see as best practices, but I would just urge an unfavorable report and keep notice in the newspaper and online as it is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The last speaker is Mary Kowalski.
Jotting down a few extra notes here. Thank you for your. Okay. Good morning. My name is Mary Kowalski. I live in the Westminster area, and I went on the website, your website, this morning to see what your agenda was. But let's face it, folks, I'm maybe a little bit unusual person. I mean, I've run for public office 5 times. I just finished running for Board of Ed. So, I mean, I'm one of those hyper-connected, hyper-type person that's always going and checking the government websites. And even for me, sometimes months will go by and I don't check to see what's on your agenda, okay? So to say that you're just going to put notice of a public hearing just on your government website is just ludicrous. I really have to say it's shameful that it ever made it to this board to a public hearing. You know, for years we hear our elected officials decry how citizens are not involved, even make jokes about it. I've even heard, shamefully. And here we have something as important as appealing zoning decisions, and you want to possibly eliminate putting the notice of that in the newspaper? Shame on you. And also reducing it down from one notice, or the other option is to reduce it from one notice in the newspaper from 2 down to 1. Again, shame, 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 shame. And I'm worried about the slippery slope. If you do that for this, we know what's coming. All public hearing, notice of all public hearings are going to come out of the newspaper and just be put on government websites. And what a coincidence. Now we have major, massive rezoning for our entire county coming up, okay? We've got master plan in the Freedom area, still controversial, still being challenged, and all of the zoning for the entire county, you're gonna eliminate putting it in the newspaper. A lot of people still read the Carroll County Times. I'm not a fan of the Carroll County Times. I've made that very clear, but a lot of people read it for obituaries, they read it for classifieds, they read it for notice of public hearings. And so, I plead with you not to do this. And for all those times when our elected officials decry that people don't get involved, I say this is your chance to show some integrity, to show some consistency. And yes, you give notice to adjoining properties, but these decisions affect more than just the person that lives next door. They affect traffic for thousands of people. That's why the requirement for public notice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that we close the hearing, leave the record open for 10 days.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item, comprehensive rezoning, commercial industrial employment tax and procedure. Ms. Linda Eisenberg and Mary Lane, I believe.
We actually have a public comment on that.
All right, we'll go with the public comment first.
Good morning, Clark Schaefer. I'm a lawyer that represents various property owners in Carroll County. I'm also a citizen, resident, and taxpayer of the county. Frankly, I thought I'd comment after Ms. Eisenberg's presentation, but it's okay, I'll do it before. I have one comment on it, and that is the recommendation that the board take further action in the form of a resolution for deferral of all zoning text and map amendments while this effort is in progress. As well as consider a grandfathering clause. Now, the grandfathering clause certainly should be considered as part of the adoption of this text amendment, no problem. But the deferral is a big problem for many of my clients, and it's a problem because your existing zoning ordinance, I'm not going to denigrate it, I've worked with it for 40 years, but like all zoning ordinances, it's ambiguous. It's the nature of the beast that you can't list every use, especially in our fast-moving society. Microbreweries, vineyards, distilleries, where people never thought they would go or be viable. There's a million uses like that. And I have, in many, many instances, I represent people, I get the call, hey, so-and-so wants to lease my space for this. Look in the ordinance. Gee, I don't know. Let's go see Jay Voigt. Let's go see. Jay Voigt says, yeah, I don't find it either. It's close to this one. It's not this one. So we go, and it's a use that everybody agrees, or almost, is wonderful. We want it. It's a contributor to the economic development of the county. Boom, text amendment. Now, I know that's a pain in the rear, but you've done many of them. You've seen them. It's the nature of the beast. Happens in every jurisdiction. To defer it while this effort is in progress, forgive me, but I've been around too long to be told that this is going to be a quick effort. Now, I kind of would like this to be a quick effort. but this could be a year. This could be 2 years. I mean, I'm sure everybody's going to go all out to get it done, but I think we all know that's too long to deprive citizens and property owners of the right to participate in the legislative process of their government and request a text amendment. Doesn't mean you have to grant them, means you have to handle. It's what you do. That's what this government, part of what you do for a living, is you review these things and present them. So I urge you not to put such a moratorium on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clay.
All right, now we'll have Ms. Eisenberg and Ms. Lane come up.
Clark doesn't know, but when Einstein was talking about the theory of relativity, he was talking about what our version of fast is compared to the rest of it.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
So again, we're here today to talk to you about the comprehensive rezoning effort. We've been before you several times in the past before with regards to this, and today is just a wrap-up of where we are now and some of the next steps with regard to the comprehensive rezoning. So just to reiterate, since it's been some time, why are we doing this? As you all know, we just adopted our Freedom Community Comprehensive Plan, and several years ago we adopted the Carroll County Master Plan. And one of the strongest implementation tools that you have at your disposal is rezoning and the comprehensive rezoning. And this accomplishes several things from the plan. One is some of the land use recommendations with regards to the maps, and then the updated land use definitions that roll into now what we're working on for the text amendments. And it's also accommodating the plan's housing and economic development goals and objectives, as well as other goals and objectives found throughout each of these plans. And just to reiterate, when we began this process several years ago, this just wasn't planning staff driven. This was really driven through our concept team. And I'm happy to say that our concept team is here today. They're sitting in the back. Paige Sunderland, Clay Block, Tom Devilbis, and Jay Voigt, Mary Lane, and myself have been working diligently since the adoption of the master plan with regards to working forward on this process. And it does move slowly at times. It's hard to get everyone together, but especially in the last 12 months or so, we've really been moving quite quickly on getting this moved forward for you all. So we did a review of the industrial districts in 2015 through August of 2016. And had approval by our Planning Commission in 2016. Then in October of 2016, we moved forward with the commercial districts. And again, all zoning, as you just saw, even changes to our advertising always comes through the Planning Commission. That's part of our county code. So Planning Commission has reviewed all of the districts. In March of 2017, we talked for our proposal of regulation of size of retail services. I know you all have heard this many times in the 3 commercial districts that were recommended in the master plan and also in the Freedom Plan. And then staff work was completed on the 3 commercial districts in July of 2017. This has all been posted on our comprezoning.org website, carrollrezoning.org website since then, and we've been tracking this progress and sending out notifications to the public as we've moved forward. We've also had a focus group to get those in the community that work with our zoning code on a regular basis involved as well, and to get their feedback. So the Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Realtors, the IDA, the EDC, the Bar Association, and the Carroll chapter of the Maryland Society of Surveyors have all reviewed the commercial, industrial, and employment campus text, and they've given us feedback, and we've incorporated that feedback where appropriate. In the fall of 2017, again, the focus group reviewed and commented on this. And then, as you recall, last year we had, or actually this past winter, we had 5 meetings around the county in each commissioner district with regards to launching what is the proposed text in each of these districts. We received feedback. We went back to our concept team and discussed those comments. And again, where appropriate, we've incorporated what the comments were and suggestions at that time. And earlier this month of November, we went to the Planning Commission to say now we're wrapping this up, and they forwarded the text with a positive recommendation for you all to review. And so that's where we're here today, is to begin. What we're going to start is with a high-level overview of everything that we've been working on. So we're not really going to get into the details of the text or the maps, but we want to lay out for you the game plan moving forward and what some of the fundamental changes are in the commercial industrial employment campus text.
And Linda, as you go through that overview, there's one question that's come up that I would like clarification on as part of the high-level overview. The question came up is, let's just say hypothetically you had a piece of land zone C, 3 acres of land zone C2, and you had another parcel of land that was 100 acres of land on zone C2. Are we going to allow multiple buildings as long as they're each within the maximum size? If you could address that as you go through the overview,
Sure.
I'd appreciate it.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. So this will happen in 2 parts. The text part, because again, part of this effort is to update the text, and then the map portion. And the maps will follow along with the land use recommendations in each of the plans. So again, 10 general concepts were utilized in the development of the rezoning text amendments to the commercial, industrial, and the employment campus. And we came to this body more than a year ago to outline those concepts with you all to get your approval as we moved forward to make sure that this was agreeable to the commissioners. So we updated regulations that best fit Carroll County. We revised the purpose and intent for all districts. We eliminated a specific use structure where possible. We did a utilization table format rather than what we have now is just an enumerated listing of all the allowable uses in a particular district. We used a priority of highest and best use for each district. We created new uses and eliminated obsolete uses. As Mr. Schaefer stated earlier, sometimes zoning codes can't keep up with some of the most recent developments that we didn't even envision happening on our land. But we tried to eliminate and keep up and make it as up to date as we could for today's trends. Accessory uses to be more consistent with each zoning district. Fewer conditional uses in the industrial 2 district, which is equivalent to our current industrial general, and making the bulk requirements more flexible. So again, going back to currently, we have those enumerated uses listed out. What has changed, and this will be not only just for the commercial, industrial, and employment campus, but moving forward with the residential districts, the conservation, and the ag, is this table of uses that will be broken down categorically. So that way you can see all of the commercial, industrial, employment campus districts together and what is permitted, what is conditional, and what is prohibited in each district. And then if there's an additional code reference, that'll be also a part of that table. So it makes it much more user-friendly. So some additional text policy considerations for the future are, and we're going to bring some of this up today, is how to handle projects in process if someone's already developing a site plan, considering grandfathering in some of those. How to handle non-conforming uses. Admittedly, there will be times where certain properties, even though it's not our intent, will no longer be conforming. And the idea is that we want to move to something different. So as those properties redevelop, they would be more in alignment now with what the current zoning is with their land uses. And that's just part of the natural order of change in a community. Changes in bulk requirements. There was a proposal forwarded within this to have residential uses in the employment campus. National trends are that people want to live, work, play scenario, and our employment campus district is meant to be a higher end employment area for higher end employment. And so part of that is to attract those businesses and the people that would be working there is to have more of a campus-like setting with regards to having some residential and other amenities involved. So the zoning has been tailored to that. Removing age restricted from commercial districts. And I have a note with regards to that just for this board's consideration. Part of it was to remove some of those, I don't want to call them incompatible uses, but other types of uses that we have historically allowed in our districts. That was one of the key tenets of all of the zoning districts. For instance, in residential, we allow medical office complexes and some things that you would traditionally consider more commercial service-based, not really residential. And same with the commercial districts. We allowed age-restricted communities in our commercial districts. And when we developed this, at the time, the Freedom Plan had a little more of the higher density districts to allow for age-restricted. And part of the residential tenant was to not allow some of the higher intensity uses like an age-restricted community in the lower intensity zones. So now there is a slight conundrum of that. If we want to keep age-restricted, do we have enough land for that? Maybe want to reconsider keeping that age-restricted housing community as an allowable use within the commercial districts. And I would not recommend the commercial low, but perhaps the commercial medium and the commercial high, which is consistent with our current zoning as it stands. And then again, if you're still agreeable to the size restrictions for general retail and service uses. So I know this is a small graphic and I have an individual slide for each one of these, but in order to move from the text process to the mapping process in an orderly manner, and to keep all of our sanity, because there is a lot happening with this, we've developed a phased-in approach for each of the various iterations of how we would move from a BNR BG scenario to now our new commercial C1, C2, and C3 districts. And this was all in the packet that was forwarded to you a week or so ago for your review. And you've seen this before, we've talked about this, especially in Planning Commission. So phase one, and I know this is a lot of words, but the idea is that if a property already is BNR and BG, and is not a municipal growth area, so meaning the areas surrounding our towns. And again, this does not apply to the municipalities because they have their own local law of zoning ordinances. Then they would be rezoned according to their designated land use that was identified in the 2014 Master Plan or the Freedom Plan. So this includes properties that are moving from BNR and BG to other zoning districts. And that is, we have some residential properties that are actually in neighborhoods that somehow were just a tip of a BNR district, especially along the 26 corridor. So we would move them into the residential district that they're actually should be in and the rest of their communities in. So that would kind of clean up some of that. And then IG and IR.
Well, quick question
yes.
about that. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, what you're saying, if it's BNR or BG, it'll automatically be transposed into C1, C2, or C3?
Correct.
So
in accordance with the land use.
So going back to Mr. Schaefer's comments, is there anything that precludes us from just doing that immediately, since the mapping is just going to be automatic anyway?
There isn't.
Except that you wouldn't have a text.
Right. You wouldn't have the text.
To apply it to.
Well, that we would be. Sorry, you're suggesting adopting the text, and this would just happen automatically.
Well, we had talked once, this Board of Commissioners, about getting the text done in stages, and this commercials being the first thing we would complete. I thought, wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah.
Doug?
So can you go back to that prior slide, Linda, your timetable? So phase one is what period of time?
We would say, within the first 1 to 4 months of this. Phase two would take maybe the next 4 to 6 months, 6 to 10, and 10 to 18. And this is just a very general outline.
Right. So this is for both commercial and industrial?
And employment campus.
And employment campus, all right. And this is 1 to 4 months from when?
From the time that we adopt the text.
So we're going to adopt the text and then take another 1 to 4 months? I thought what you just said was the text was the thing that was going to take the time to do.
Well, it depends. There's a lot of variables. It depends on how much of the text you want to get into, how much discussion we want to have on the text. And this was just a game plan. We don't, if this body chooses to do other things, we could adopt all of the text and the zoning maps at the same time. I think there's just a lot of variables and notifications that need to happen.
So just so we're all on the same page, could you give an example of what adjusting the text would look like? I mean,
you would actually, the text that's been given to you,
right,
that would be adopted
right,
as the new code and replaced in our county code. But the text should not become effective until the maps have been completed.
And the text is a description property by property, or is it a property?
It's just like our current zoning code. It's the actual code.
Okay, so it's the verbiage that we've already seen.
Yes, which is part of the packet that we forwarded.
Right, okay, so you're talking about those, so I'm just trying to get an idea of, so those have to come before us for adoption,
Correct.
okay?
And you
Well,
have to
not
have a
us,
public
but-
hearing.
But them, but yeah.
Correct.
So, all right, so if the public hearing, and so are we still writing those, or are
No,
they
you
done?
have that before you, and
Okay.
that's what we were saying. There may be some considerations of things of what was presented that you may or may not agree with. You may want to adjust.
Okay, so do we have a mechanism in place for how we're planning to do that then? Are there maybe
We'll come before you. We can have work sessions. That's part of what today is going to be about, the discussion of how you want to move forward.
Okay.
So this is just a tentative outline,
Okay.
because we don't have a process in place. So this is basically our suggestions of what would make sense to keep things orderly. And frankly, I think phases 1 through 3 could be done at one time, but it would help because not everything has a plan associated with it, would be helpful for the public to know how their property would fall in line. So let me finish going through the rest of the phases, then we can circle back around with regards to maybe timing and things. These are just our general thoughts as we were laying this out from the beginning. And then phase 2, if a property is already zoned BNR and BG, and is in a municipal growth area or a designated rural village with a village commercial and industrial designation, then it would be rezoned according to the decision tree. And the decision tree was in that packet, and that's the next slide that I have. The reason for this is that municipal growth area plans are not necessarily the county's plans. They have been plans worked on jointly with the municipalities. And so when those properties were to be or are to be annexed eventually in the future by those municipalities, they would be rezoned to the municipal zoning, not county zoning. But we need to put them somewhere. We can't have those areas still hanging on with BNR and BG. So that's why we developed this decision tree approach. And then anything IR and IG would move to its applicable IR and IG zoning districts. And then at this point in time, there would be no BNR and BG left in the zone, on the map, on the ground. So then the decision tree would follow along the lines of what is presented in front of you, that each C1, C2, and C3 is housed in a particular BNR and BG, so we're moving from 2 to 3. So again, the idea was the lower intensity BNR would be a C1, the higher intensity BNR would be a C2, the lower intensity BG could be a C2, and the higher intensity BG would be a C3. And we made the determination based on road type, how big the lot was, what the existing use, if there was a structure on, what its current size was, what it's near, and then the characteristics of the surrounding areas. And we did that for each one of these. And we've already mapped all of this out as well, so we have an idea of which each property would be. But you wouldn't have a C1 necessarily along our 140 or our major roads. That would really be in agreement with a C2. And our C3 would be the larger properties in a highly commercial area, preferably on water and sewer, that would be facilitated on a C3.
But you're saying
Bless you.
those designations already exist in what we've done with these plans, correct?
For the planning areas, but not in the municipal growth areas.
I'm questioning about the acreage. Like, for example, C2, it says 1 to 5 acres.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we have C2 that's greater than 5 acres in the county?
We do, and we also make appointment, we may have some, not very much actually, but if it's on a bigger road or has a more intense use on it currently, then we would make that, we would still keep that as a C2 because you wouldn't be able to have a large structure.
All right, so these are guidelines, not constrictions.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
This was for us as staff to be able to say, okay, for these areas that don't have a plan in place, how would we place these particular properties and what makes sense?
Okay, what happens if you have a C2 on, say, 4.5 acres, and they want to do a C3 designation on it, or thing. Is it possible to change between?
If someone lets us know that that is a consideration, but we don't know if they want to do that without them coming forward to us. You know, the idea of this is not to also have a relitigation of plans, or for anyone to come forward for, let me just have a rezoning during this phase. There could be opportunity for that if this body chooses to do so. A lot of jurisdictions do open up a comp rezoning beyond what is in the master plans. But again, those are just all things that this body would need to consider. And then a phase 3 property is not zoned BNR and BG, but again, in the master plan and even in the Freedom area, we had a lot of properties that are acting full on commercial because of how our current zoning is utilized. And so we felt it would be more appropriate to move them out of our residential type district and actually move them into the commercial district that would be most appropriate for them. And then the idea is at this point in time, the new zoning code would become effective. So we didn't have maps to apply it to, so even though the text was adopted, if you don't have a place to put it on the ground, it's not effective. So now at this point, it would become effective, would be the recommendation. And again, I know we were talking about the times when we had fleshed out maybe if we just did each one as a discrete, but I do feel we could do phases 1 through 3 all at one time. And some of the other recommendations would be to mail, and I believe we should be mailing out to each of those property owners that they have been identified through this process. And that was in the public outreach kind of booklet that was presented to you, all kind of talking about how this process would take place of notification and things like that. And this has been on our website as well as the text materials. And then a phase 4 thought was that if a property is not zoned BNR and BG and has been identified in the master plan or the Freedom Plan as commercial, low, medium, or high, industrial, heavy, or unemployment campus, but it's not already zoned in a commercial way, it may be ag or conservation or residential moving to commercial or industrial, that this should be done by request, because not every property may be ready or ripe to move forward with that request. You don't have to do it this way, it's just a suggestion because of other timing issues. Maybe a road needs to be constructed, improvements need to happen before you would want to see that come to fruition. Because again, a plan is a plan for the horizon where you want to go to. Doesn't mean you have to hit it on the mark today. So as part of this effort to help navigate where all of this information is, what phases you all would be, a property would be in, we have developed a comprehensive rezoning map with the phases. And Darby Metcalf on our staff, as well as Tom Dowd as part of the county's GIS, we've been working with them over the last year or so trying to develop this website that would be user-friendly to help property owners navigate this comp rezoning process. So the idea is you would go to this website, you would type in your address or your account ID, and I'll just type in an address I happen to know. And then it kind of gives you instructions here on the left-hand side on how to get started, and that the information that you would be looking for would happen in the left-hand panel, and it would zoom into the particular property. So the information gives you the tax account ID number. It would give you its existing zoning and then a link to the zoning code. So you could click here and then go to our American Legal, which would tell you what the current code allows. Then it would give you the comprehensive rezoning information. Again, what your existing zoning is, what your designated land use is, and then just as we have a link to the zoning, this is not live today, this is still in testing, but once we launch, this will all be linked up, that you would click on commercial high and go to the land use definitions that were just adopted in the Freedom Plan, and that should be adopted into the master plan as well. Then you would click on future zoning. Again, there would be a link to what C3 is, so you would know what zoning text means for our commercial 3, the acreage, And then the phases we just discussed. So you would have a link to the phase so you knew what type of property you have, what phase you are in. And then there'd just be additional other parcel information. Again, when this goes live, the actual zoning, so here's the legend here, but the actual zoning would be colored and the future land use would be covered. And then you would have a tool that you could toggle back and forth to. If you didn't want to read it, you could swipe back and forth or choose your base map on what things you wanted to see on this map. So again, just another way for people to be able to see publicly what their properties are being designated in a one-stop shop.
All right, so Linda, what are we asking people to do with this information? Are we saying that your zoning is going to change to this new zoning, or we want to hear from you if you want this zoning changed? Because
for the BNR BG, they have to change. We are not going to have BNR
so what's the
BG.
benefit of all this information other than them knowing it?
Well, I think it's two things. Them knowing, and I think them knowing is really important because there are some different rules that are going to apply now that were not there before with BNR and BG. So that way they understand what their zoning is. So it's knowledge that they're actually even being.
But this assumes they're going to come out and look at it. I mean, aren't we under some obligation to say, okay, we're going to do some sort of a correspondence that says, this was your zoning, this is your zoning, this is what you need to know?
And we will do that. And we've already started that process. I mean, again, part of that postcard that we sent out a year ago was to put everyone on notice that we are working on this, be paying attention. And we've been talking about it for several years, not that this effort was going to happen. But part of this process, and as we laid out in this document, is that they will be mailed for those that are changing what you are now and what you're going to. But there is no choice because BNR and BG are going away.
So then I would go back to, what is the purpose of the website? What are we asking them to do? Because this seems very, I mean, it seems very, very cool that it can do all this stuff. It seems very confusing to me. And even just the descriptions of what you just described, and maybe my head's not in the game today, but it just seems overwhelmingly confusing. If I had to describe it to a constituent, I just don't know that I could.
And there's a lot of moving parts, and I think one of the ideas of the website was just to get more information out there.
But I was going to say, if at some point on such and such a date, if you're this and you're going to be that and this is what you need to know, what else are we discussing?
If I may, I think it might be most helpful for the folks that are clearly BG and whatever today, BNR today. They'll be sent a letter and they'll be whatever.
In terms of numbers of them, isn't that the vast majority of folks? I mean, the folks that are falling into the other categories are by far the exception.
Correct.
Right? So, okay. So, to me, if we get the text right, and I'm always frustrated by length of time, but if we get the text right and these things are automatic and it's a document that says you were this and you are this, why is it not get the text right, get it approved, and on April 1st everybody's going to be whatever they're going to be? I mean, I'm not sure what we're this seems to me like we're asking people to participate in something we don't really want them to participate in.
Well, I mean, you will have to have a public hearing process, so they will be required.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, I mean, during that period of time, I understand you have to do that. But I'm saying this sounds like we want feedback or input, and really it's a foregone conclusion, isn't it?
Well, if I can jump in, it seems different to me.
Okay.
It seems that once I get my postcard, it's saying I had BNR or whatever it was, and it's changing to this. I can go to this map, look it up, put my address in, and then I can go down here and see what the change actually means to my. So it just gives me information.
What do you mean? What it means?
Well, if I went from I don't know, BNR to commercial high, I'm just looking at it.
Right.
I can click on commercial high, and that tells me what commercial high is.
Well, why wouldn't we put that in the documentation? If I'm sending, and I don't think it should be a postcard. I think you should get a legal-looking letter that says, this was your business, this is what you were, this is what you are. Here's the definition of what you were, this is the definition of what you are, and here are the permitted uses. Like, why are we doing anything beyond that?
How many properties does this affect?
For the first phase, I think it's like 300 properties. So, and then each phase, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but each phase we know how many properties would be affected.
Well, I definitely agree a letter going out to each of those property owners, and a formal letter should be sent to them explaining what the change is to them. I mean, this is a
And we
major
will be
change to
doing
our
that.
whole.
That's part of the plan, yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know why this is part of the plan. It just seems very confusing to me. And again, we're going to do outreach to get people to come here to do what? We're going to give them information that legally we have to give them anyhow, or at least we should. And again, I think it's great that we can do it. I mean, it's very cool. And maybe let them know it's out there. But I don't know. It just seems to me like we're indicating we want them to do something that's a foregone conclusion. And I think it's just going to slow things down.
So, and that may be, simplicity is better, so I'm not arguing with it at all, but this also is for the long term. Remember, this is the very first, these 3 zoning designations are the first. There's still yet the residential, the ag, and the conservation. So ultimately, residents will be putting it in and finding out if they've changed, so there are, this is not just for the commercial.
But aren't we going to notify them the same way? I mean,
Yeah, ultimately, everybody will be notified the same way, but it's just, it's just, this particular aspect is really just for the wider public for informational purposes.
And if you're not one of the ones identified, you wouldn't be getting a letter. So this would be helpful for the community too, to know what properties around them are being rezoned as well. And also too, because again, if it was a text amendment from, like we are with the IR and IG, I mean, you're just going to now I1 and I2. That's more or less a text amendment. But because you're adding a 3rd district and it's not a 1-for-1, like it is with the IR and IG, that it would just be helpful to just reiterate where you are. And maybe we got it wrong on some of these, and maybe someone wants to come forward and say, what, I really feel I'm a C1, I really should be a C2, and here's why. And again, zoning is at your discretion to how you would want a property rezoned.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the thing, though. To me, that would be part of the legal notice. I mean, you're getting this, here's your time frame. If there's a simple, direct way to give everybody the same information, and, we just went through this planning process, which was an absolute challenge, as you know. I mean, despite all the greatest efforts, people see some stuff, they don't see some other stuff, some participate, some don't. If there's a document that says, here's the document, this is everything you need to know. Where you are, what you are. If you don't think you're the right thing, this is what it ought to be. This is what the classifications are. Here's the timetable to fix it. It just seems to me if we got those documents right one time, once we got the definitions done, got them out and had a date certain, I think to me, the bigger issue is the longer this drags on, the more difficult it is. And so to me, this has got to get done. And I just feel like, and again, we're really not asking people, and I think you're going to find the same thing when we get to the residential and some of the other stuff. You're not really asking them for a lot of input and participation. The last iteration of this, we were asking for everybody's input, right? I mean, that was the whole freedom planning process, and seeing the maps, and it could be this and it could be that. But I mean, at this point, if my neighbor is C2 and he used to be BNR, that might be interesting information to me, but I don't know that that's anything I need to know today.
But just a question here on your land use categories, and some of them are going to be missed, and you change that, and the neighbor goes down, or the person looks at the land use category, and we're going to miss some of them because you can't possibly list everything. What happens to a new land use category that pops up 2 years from now that we never envisioned, and they go to Jay, it doesn't, hey, you're not in here anywhere.
Well, then they're going to appeal for a text amendment just like anybody else,
We're
right?
gonna have to then go back.
That process will have to exist, though I think the sooner we get the first iteration of this done, the more likely it is we can get to the exceptions, to the fringes. And I'm not saying to rush the process of getting the text work done, but it just seems to me if it's that, the map, and then getting this out, I just, the more simple and the more direct, because I don't think we could do this by any other way than giving someone a notice that says this is what's happened, right?
Yes, and we will, and that's part of this process.
But sometimes I think if you say, well, you could see it here, see it here, see it here, I don't want it to take away from the fact that you're going to get this thing in the mail, and this is critical. This is the thing you need to look at. This has all of the information, and because stuff can be misinterpreted, stuff can be.
So I guess the question is it possible to eliminate all these phases? I think this is a weird question.
Right.
And condense them all into a notice, a letter of
Yes,
some sort.
absolutely.
And say, like, as Commissioner Howard said, like, date certain, you know, this is gonna happen unless you, whatever they might be.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And you do all 300 plus or whatever, or
Absolutely.
at the one time.
And then if someone does have an issue, I mean, to the public comment that was made, wouldn't we know, we would know fairly quickly, right? If there was an issue that
Well,
someone wanted to appeal or reconsider or whatever. I mean, I know it's different than the specific issue that was addressed, which is whether we do that during that, and we can look at that separately. But frankly, anybody that's been on hold, even if they agree with their designation, the sooner we get that done, the better.
Sure, because people are on hold at the moment.
Right, because even if I agree with my designation, I could be going for financing,
We
right?
understand- Yep.
Yeah, and so I got a bank that's waiting to see what I'm gonna be, and I said, well, listen, I can tell you I'm gonna be such and such, but that such and such doesn't even exist yet. You know, it's been hard enough when people aren't in their, you know, principal permitted uses even just to get funding. I just think anything we can do to shorten the distance to the goal and make it as simple as possible. I don't wanna leave anything out, I don't wanna rush it, but I also don't wanna overcomplicate it or drag it out.
And the property owners need to have their voice in this. I really believe that you don't go in and change anything without their input.
Well,
Well, they're not gonna have a voice in
they're
a
not
lot of
gonna
it,
have
though.
input
That's the
because-
problem, well, not the problem, but that's the process.
Well, I know, but I want to make sure that's very clear, that
Well-
they have input into this and
they won't. They'll have public, so just so you're clear, so you fully understand, the course we're going down now is to eliminate the BG and the BNR zones.
I understand, C1,
And
C2.
replace them with these others. And so there will be no choice. If you're sitting on a BNR property today, it will, well, let me use the IR. If you're sitting in an IR property today, it will become I-1 tomorrow, and you don't get a choice.
Right. Now, if you think you're in the wrong classification, you have the ability to address that issue.
Appeal that.
Right.
And
But the movement of these categories
Yeah, I'm gonna try to
is,
It's gonna do exactly the opposite of what you're saying. If we allow that to happen, then it is gonna drag out. We're moving from here to here.
That's what Linda, I think, was trying to, she can explain it better, but I think that's what she's trying to explain, is there are some very clear, you
Yes.
are this, you are an IR, you are an IG, and you will clearly become an I-1 or an I-2, C4. But then there are some, and that's the ones they wanted to address first.
Correct.
And they just wanted to let them know that that's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are these groups that have weird things. They either have for some reason, they lop over into residential, or they
Right.
cover a couple different areas, or there's something weird about them. And then they wanted to address those as a group second. And then the third group was the group that don't actually have a land use designation, because they're in those designated growth areas that are around each of our municipalities. And that's the way the master plan and then the freedom plan were passed. In prior plans, we've given those, I believe, land use designations. These last two plans, we didn't. And so then they have to be addressed individually. And that's why the different phases.
well, who makes the determination if it's in the municipal growth area, what their designation should be?
Well, that's what we were saying, it was the decision tree. Because again, the designations were determined by the town's plans,
Right.
not the county planning process. And so they have designations that correspond with what a zoning category would be in the town when they are to be annexed in at some point in the future. And that's the idea of those municipal growth areas, is that the land use would be acted upon and with a rezoning when they're annexed in. So that's why we had to do the decision tree. So for those properties in particular, they don't know what their C1, C2, and C3 is. And this gets out early, so when we do send a letter out to them, they kind of see the lay of the land.
So how are we reconciling that with the municipalities then?
Well, they're not in the municipalities.
No, I understand that, but they're gonna be, so
But then they'll rezone them accordingly.
then why don't we just give them land use designations?
Because a long time ago, when the planning process was set out, we had done these area plans, these designated growth area plans.
Okay, but if we're not asking the municipality to give us the land use designation, and we didn't do it as part of our process, who's deciding what the land use designation should be?
They still have the same land use designation as they have from their municipal growth area plan that the municipalities, because that's happening in the future. But we still have lands around these municipalities that are still under county control for a zoning authority, and we can't have them stay BNR and BG. They have to move to C1, C2, or C3.
Why can't we have them that way?
We don't want to keep two codes. We're trying to
We're going to end up with
eliminate.
two codes anyhow, unless the municipalities are going to adopt, hang on a second, because I know what I'm talking about. The municipalities, when they bring them in, are going to try to bring them into a corresponding zoning.
For theirs, yes.
Right. So if they don't have zoning that corresponds with our new zoning, then they're not going to be able to bring them into the same zoning classification.
No, they always rezone. They all have their own zoning. The municipalities, some of them don't correspond to ours. Some of them, we actually do have very similar zoning text to theirs.
Then why?
Because it's not in the corporate limits is what we're talking about.
So if someone came to us right now and wanted a rezoning, and they were in a municipal growth area, and there was a land use designation, what would drive the decision to rezone that? The municipality's land use designation, but it would be our decision?
It would just be like a piecemeal rezoning. They would say, change your mistake, and we feel our property this happened, and it was.
Then if that's the case, how are we justifying making any sort of zoning change based on the land use designation of the municipality? I mean, either
Because
those are the driving factor or they're not.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be, because we still have the control of those lands, first and foremost, around the municipalities. They have just the planning foresight of where those properties should move to in the future, which may not even be commercial or industrial at some point. Maybe they want it to be residential in their future, but it currently has a gas station on it. We can't leave that in BNR and BG. So again, that's where that decision tree comes into play.
So I go back to who's making the decision about the land use
county
designation?
would, we're not worrying about the land use designation, because this is the zoning, so that's not.
So what's going to determine what classification they should go into then?
So if you're already currently zoned BNR and BG, it would be the decision tree that would determine what C1, C2, or C3.
Can you show me the decision tree?
Sure.
Was that planted out back or something? I don't.
Doesn't land use designation drive the zoning?
Yeah, well, that's
To
what
an
we've been
extent,
told
but
for a year.
It's not the only thing that would drive your zoning, and the board ultimately has a decision on what they want to do with any zoning
Right.
category.
But given that, I don't know why we wouldn't have just done land use designations as part of the plan. Why
That
would we
was
say,
not-
listen, here's a whole bunch of area we're just not going to make any decisions about, only to come back and have to make piece by piece decisions in those areas? Why would that not have just been part of the plan?
It was not a part of the master plan. That had not been a part of the master planning process, and the decision was made at the time of the master plan not to do that.
So, okay, so what do we got here?
So if you're currently zoned business neighborhood retail.
Okay, and I'm in a municipal growth area. Okay.
Then, if you're along a local road and you're less than an acre and you have a built structure less than 10,000 square feet, and you have the existing use of land, again, meaning that what's on your ground now is residential or a low-intensity commercial, then you would go into a C1. And then for medium, C2, if you're on a slightly higher road, more visible designate area, and you're between 1 and 5 acres, and your existing building is between 10,000 and 100,000 square feet, and you have commercial industrial is on your current land, then you would go into a C2. And so on and so forth.
So if there's a parcel of land that we might have said, okay, well, that would be a great place for such and such, all we're doing is updating these based on what their existing use is.
Mm-hmm. And where they're located, correct.
And how many properties do we think fall into this category?
Doug, do you have that number? We don't know offhand, but we do have it in our office.
Is it closer to 10 or 1,000?
Well, not 1,000. I mean, probably for phase two. 50? I'm not 100%. We can get that number for you. It's not as many.
So are we being asked to adopt the decision tree?
Again, it's not hard and fast, so this would be just up for consideration as a rule. And sometimes the rule just doesn't apply, and sometimes you just know
So someone's
what
going
it
to come
is.
to us and say, it won't be to me, it'll be to you three. Commissioner Frazier, my zoning was changed. It was changed to this because of the decision tree. You didn't decide what the land use was. Eventually, I'm going into the municipality anyhow, but because I have an existing use of this and I'm next to a road for that, that's what I was. Are you comfortable with that? That seems to me very, it seems like no one's we're not making a conscious decision what to do with these properties.
I think that this is not an arbitrary decision because you have these criteria here for why it changed from one to the other. And then when you get your letter, if you don't agree with it, now's your time to say, you know what? You have me, I was B&R, you have me down as a C2, but I really think I should be C1, and this is why. And that can be done before that thing. And also, if you go to the map that was just up there, you can say, okay, I put my address in, and I see that I'm going to be a C1, and there's other people.
But who's making these decisions? We didn't approve this.
Not yet.
But we're not being told we are.
Yes, you approve this process.
We're approving the decision tree and these criteria.
The whole process shall be approving, but we're not like adopting. This is just a.
Well, this is going to determine. I mean, we've talked for 4 years about a plan and go property by property and argue these things out. Now we got a whole bunch of properties that are going to be decided by a matrix and criteria that we're not weighing in on. That's ludicrous.
We're weighing in on it. Yeah. That's our job, right? That's why we're doing this right now.
Which is why I asked this, are we talking about whether these are the right criteria and we're going to adopt this? Because I thought the answer to that was no. Which it was.
I guess adopt, I'm thinking like an adoption. I mean, yes, you will give us direction if you feel that there should be different criteria.
I don't think the intention was to come to us with this to approve or not approve or to even debate or discuss. I mean, I appreciate that this was put together, but after all the discussion, property by property, we've got a whole bunch of properties that are going to have their designation determined without a formal discussion by the board and a formal decision by the board.
I agree.
I don't think that can happen. I mean, even if we just look at this and say, this is great, we're comfortable with that, and let's adopt it, someone's got to say, where did this decision come from? I mean, isn't this what we've just been fighting out inch by inch for 4 years?
A point of clarification, Doug, I zoned out for a second, but if the property owner disagrees, what is his recourse?
Well, he has an appeal process, but the problem is that do we want to do it that way where it's on them to have to appeal something, or do we want to at least have a criteria for what we did?
What is the impact of this on the county? We really don't know.
Well, we don't, and I also don't understand, and maybe if it's in a municipal growth area, I don't understand how the municipality doesn't have some input into it, because, I mean, if we zone something completely different than what the municipality wants, someone buys that property and does something on it that's completely counter to what the municipality would want, doesn't that affect their growth plans? Well, we were planning on annexing that area, except, you know, you put this high-rise something or other in there, or this.
Well, you have the characteristics of surrounding area on that decision tree. So if it's.
Well, that's a pretty vague term too, isn't it?
But if it's.
Okay, I got a house on one side and a building on the other. What's my characteristic? Schizophrenic? I mean, I hate to be a pain in the neck on the next to the last day I'm going to be here, but I mean, we did all this work, and we're going to end up with this thing that's and it's not, I understand you guys have got to put together a framework. I don't disparage that, but that ought to be a framework the board consciously accepts, decides on, and approves, and then that decision shouldn't take 9 more months to adjudicate. It ought to be as automatic as the other decisions.
I agree with the time frame here. I shouldn't take that long, but if we agreed this is the way to transfer from B&R and BG to C1, C2, C3, and this is what we're going to adopt, then we move ahead and we put it in, and it shouldn't take 9 months. I agree with that part, but what we're doing right now, I thought was looking this over and saying yes or no, we like this, change, or.
If that's what we're doing, that's fine. Yeah. But then I was told no twice, so I'm just saying that I think the decision needs to be that we actually take an affirmative action on the decision tree if that's going to determine where people's properties are going. We voted on everything else all the way up and down the line. I would not be comfortable if you said, listen, my property changed to such and such. You can appeal it if you want to, which, by the way, does take some time, cost, and everything else, right? But at the same time, the reason that decision was made was because you fell into no man's land. It wasn't included in our planning, and there's a decision tree. I'm sorry, as a property owner, that would not be, to me, the level of
Is there a cost
communication.
for rezoning?
Well, if you have representation.
Yeah,
there
but I
is.
mean, even on the.
No offense to representation.
For
we
these
like you guys.
papers to be filed, is there a cost for a rezoning process?
Yes.
How much?
Well, you'd have to post, for these comprehensively, you don't have to post the properties, but you would post it in the newspaper, so it's whatever the advertising cost is for the text and the advertising cost for when we do the map changes.
But is that I think you're asking, is there a cost to the property owner?
Yes, it costs, a comprehensive rezoning process, $800 is due.
So that was for phase four. So let me, part of this is for the phasing. So anyway, the process for phases 1 through 3 is if your property was listed in phases 1 through 3, you'll receive a letter from the Department of Planning. The letter will list your property's information, its current zoning, the new zoning that you're going to, and then we would like to have, information about an informational meeting that would happen to just discuss the changes with the community. Phase 4, because these are by request, so to speak, the thought process was that properties identified in the plans that weren't quite, they were ag or conservation, wanted to move to commercial or industrial, something completely different, that these properties owners would be notified via a letter. An application process, which was in this document that we sent up to you, has an application process with it that they would apply to say, we want to now move to this more intense district, and a separate application would be made for each of the properties, and we would be asking for a fee for this. So that way people just aren't, our property owners aren't coming forward and saying, you know what, I really want to try to be industrial, and even though the master plan says I should be commercial low, so that way we get serious takers coming forward that really do want, and I feel they're ready to rezone their property.
So where phase 4 is the municipal growth areas?
No, phase 4 is anyone in the county who was identified for a change from like conservation or ag or some lower intensity use to go to commercial high or industrial, that they would come forward then and demonstrate that they're ready to move forward with a project and they want to be rezoned. Again, these are just suggestions. You don't have to do any of this. We wanted to just lay out a process. When we looked at several other jurisdictions, and they do very similar processes to this, even though it's a comp rezoning, it's a by request comprehensive rezoning. Because again, the plan doesn't have to be zoned all at one time. You can if you choose to do it that way, but it's where you want to head to over the next 30 years. Maybe not necessarily today. Maybe that farm that is zoned industrial isn't ready to be zoned industrial.
Well, couldn't that
today.
be true of someone that's in phase 1?
No, because we are not going to, unless the idea is you want to keep 2 codes, you want to keep BNR and BG on the books, NC1 and C2 and C3. But no, because we're trying to eliminate.
Well, I understand the administrative side of it. What I'm saying is if there's a property that's not developed, that may not be developed for 10 years, that property owner may not have any more interest in being reclassified as something else than somebody that falls into these phases.
But they're already zoned that way currently. Phase 1 is already zoned BNR and BG. These properties are not zoned in any commercial or industrial manner. They're just simply land that has been identified in a plan.
Okay, so do we have any idea of how many properties are represented in phase 4?
About 60.
Okay, well, I'll put those aside for a minute then. Is there any reason why we can't do the rest of what needs to be done in phases 1 through 3 by either adopting the criteria or changing the criteria, making these notifications and just getting this thing done?
No, absolutely. And that's what this is suggesting here. I mean, I think the times were up above is if you wanted to move forward in separate phases. We had to phase it and chunk it out because we needed to think of all the different scenarios. So that's why for staff purposes and to make it some sanity out of all of this is to kind of compartmentalize each type of why would someone change? How would we move from BNR and BG to a new commercial code? And that's why we listed out those phases. They do not have to happen individually. They could happen all at one time. And here would be our notification process for that. It would be just as simple as what you said.
And which of the phases was the municipal growth area?
Phase 2.
What was phase 3?
Those were ones that were operating under conditional use approval.
So they're still commercial or industrial, but they're...
Right, they're just not in their appropriate zoning category. For instance, the idea is that, we had the old Walmart site was acting as a commercial retail location, but it was zoned industrial. So those types of properties that are mismatched from what their existing zoning is and what their current use is, because they went through, which our code allows, that type of appeals process.
Right.
And again, today was just meant to get this type of feedback from you. I mean, none of this is set in stone. We needed to start somewhere as staff to be able to move forward with this process in a concise, cohesive manner. So there is room for discussion on all of this, but we wanted to present something to you all.
Sure.
So has this been run through the planning and zoning?
Yes, absolutely. We would not make it here today if it had not been gone through them.
And their feedback was?
What's here, what's seen before you. This is where they wanted to head. And they knew that there were some decisions just really left up to this board, and that's where some of the questions that we had at the beginning. So there may be text changes that you all wish to make based on the text that we've sent forward and some of the policy considerations we sent out and discussed.
So once those text changes are done, phase 1 is just a matter of communicating, right? Phase 2 and 3 are a matter of making some determination based on what's approved and then communicate. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
And that could be a topic of another discussion where we just kind of go through that and make those decisions. And I think it would be up to this body too if you want to tackle those issues first or the text itself first. And then do the text and put that aside and then come back and talk about the other 2 phases.
Gotcha.
Instead of, maybe intermingling the 2 just for everyone.
Whatever's easier.
When you're saying text, you're talking about the laundry list of businesses that would be appropriate for an area.
Everything. I mean, how the code operates, period. Okay. That's what we're talking about, is the entire code. It's more than just the list. It's the code itself, which we will, perhaps maybe work sessions would be appropriate, where we go over the text in more detail. It's really up to you or how you want to proceed moving forward.
Okay.
And then part of this process is looking to do a deferral. I think this has been a past practice before, that we would like to come back before you on the 29th, at least to make this one decision with regards to a resolution for deferrals, that the Planning Commission, which zoning moves forward before it gets to this body, would not take up the reviewing and recommending of text amendments as we move through this effort. And as well as, we do allow map amendments to come forward for change or mistake. Again, that would not come forward as we're trying to move through this process.
So if someone knows that let's say they fall into the phase 1 category, they know where they're going to be, we know where they're going to be. Is there a reason not to let them go forward with that as a rezoning?
Well, what would be the change or mistake? We're already moving them forward comprehensively, and that would, what benefit would that serve for them to go forward of a process? And then they'd have to prove change or mistake, and then we'd have to be filing that as we move forward comprehensively when they would just roll into the comprehensive. At that time, there would be no benefit to them.
Yeah, they wouldn't want to go through all that.
Yeah.
When they're getting changed anyway.
No.
This is for folks who are not
Correct.
going to be affected by the change further. I'm someplace outside and I want to be changed.
You may be a property up in Pleasant Valley comes forward and says, I really want to be industrial now because.
So do we have a freeze on those things as well then, or no?
Currently?
Yeah.
We have
Freedom
not.
area?
In the Freedom area, we did during the Freedom master planning process, but the idea is now we're moving forward
So
comprehensively.
we had public comment. Maybe I didn't understand what the context of the comment was, but what is it that we can't do that we?
Go ahead.
Well, so the next part that we were gonna, this was what, taking up text amendments. For instance, as we're moving forward on this process, would you want to take a text amendment up for IR or IG, tweaking how that works when we're getting ready to adopt a new I-1 and I-2?
Right.
That's what the text portion would be. And then the map portion would be the same if someone wanted to come through with a change or mistake on a property that we're already going to be rezoning comprehensively. Would that be something that this board would want to entertain? I would think not, but that's.
Okay.
I mean, most of the people who would be affected, who would want to change, are going to be changed by this process. So the likelihood of anybody is lower. But it's also going to, if they don't want to wait the process, then they go down the path of having to pay for, all the litigation that's associated with change and mistake. So,
Yeah, I'm just
so
trying to
benefits
understand
from
the issue that was raised in our public comment, how it relates to this. Maybe I'm not.
So that would be with the text amendment portion, is that, I think if a text amendment wanted to come through, because
Right.
the idea is that the thought was this process is going to take perhaps an undetermined amount of time.
Right.
With the
And so I have a business that likely is going to
Needs to
fall
do
into that
something
category,
next
but it
month.
doesn't exist somewhere yet.
and they want to do something next month, and this process may take, an undetermined amount of time, even though we're moving it forward as quickly as possible. But let's just say something gets hung up 12 months down the road, and we're still not there yet, and then they've lost opportunity. I think that was the argument that was being made.
So is there another way that could be approached or accommodated other than just waiting to get it done?
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
No, I'm just saying, if we had someone that falls into that category where they have something that's not in the text right now, but pretty likely that it's gonna be
well,
a zone that, which I understand nothing's final until it's final, but.
well, if they're not in the text now, and the text's out there, so if they're not in the text now, and there's a suggestion that, XYZ kind of entity should be part of C1, C2, whatever, then hopefully folks are coming to staff and saying, oh, you totally forgot about something.
Well, when I'm saying they're not in the text now, I'm saying they're not in the text of the existing zoning, which is where they'd have to be, isn't it?
Right, so someone that's currently zoned something, they want to do something else, and they feel
Right.
that there should be a text amendment done on that district. Why would we not allow them to come forward now?
Right, and so the issue is, that should be incorporated into a suggestion as well.
For the new
And I understand the draft language is still draft language until it's adopted, but someone says, I wanna open a,
Pizza Hut someplace.
or some business that was just not envisioned by our prior zoning code, that we probably would say, okay, well, that would have to go. I'm just trying to make sure that,
And with all this, do we have a financial impact on the county, at least an idea how this zoning is going to change things for us, one way or the other? Is that part of?
As far as like a cost benefit from a tax base from bringing new businesses in,
I'm looking, zoning drives everything we do in this county as far as dollars and cents, whether we see it up front or not. And is that part of what we're going to have here at the end is, this zoning does mean this impact on the county, dollars and cents wise, good or bad?
I think that would be very hard to do as a direct impact.
but we
What
have-
we are hoping is that because we have modernized the code and made some of these uses that would really spur economic development, for instance, allowing the distilleries, breweries, and wineries in districts where they're currently not allowed, because that's a new market trend and we want to tap that market. We've had a lot of demand for that would be a positive financial impact on the county. But we don't determine, just because something zones something, what type of business would go there. We make opportunities available for businesses, for houses to happen. But no, we do not have.
When we get to the residential part, that will have a major impact on us financially in the county. And we ought to have, X amount of, we have an idea of how many lots available, what's going to be the impact in driving. I mean, to put zoning in, we have to look at the whole picture. And the financial end of it is extremely important, I think, as we look at what we're doing. I mean, we can do things and think, well, this sounds good, looks good today, but ooh, this has a really negative impact on us or a positive impact on us. We ought to have some kind of financial analysis of the zoning.
Well,
before
I
we-
think you're right. I think this has to be looked at, but I think that may be another reason why we have to at least consider the possibility of opening the door up on these text amendments in the meantime, because
And sometime down the
we've
road.
had people on hold for an awfully long time. I mean, that freedom plan drug on forever, as you remember.
Yeah. That's the problem here.
No, I know. It's
But
just,
maybe not the problem, but the challenge. And what you're suggesting, I agree with, Dick, but then we're gonna delay it even further if you wanna try to do that. And I don't know how in the world you measure that. And that would be difficult to do.
Well, it's a forecast like anything else, but what we do here definitely has an impact on the county. I mean, a major impact on us.
Yeah.
Down the road, now, we may not see it as a board, but some future board's gonna see that in what we've done. It's like we're seeing what was done in 2001 in Freedom, and, you know, mistakes and the right things in it, but we ought to have an idea financially how it impacts us. Is this a way to go? And I think if we look at the financial picture on whatever we do, it kind of sets the tone to us. Yes, we go this way, or we don't go that way. And we also consider property rights of each individual here, and it's a fine line, but I think we have to look at
well, and I think ultimately you guys really, you three, really need to be the driving force on obviously what goes forward. But I do think that if we have some say in the criteria, a simplification of the process, and can allow for at least these text amendments in the meantime, if someone feels like it's compelling enough that they've just waited long enough, I think we at least have the semblance of a structure that says, okay, now let's move forward as reasonably quickly as we can, but you don't have artificial pressure on the system to rush it or to prolong it. You know what I mean? But I think that's would be my
So if I may, with the text amendments, part of the process would be that they would have to come here, we would have to then go to Planning Commission. Planning Commission would have to recommend it to this board. That's how our current code works. And that could take several months. Meanwhile, we are moving forward with this process with the text, and hopefully, if we could streamline the process, as you said, for the phases 1 and 3, which there is no reason why they can't happen simultaneously. It would be a lot of additional effort to maybe put things a month ahead of time. I can't imagine it would move much quicker than what we're doing here, because we haven't even gone to Planning Commission, haven't drafted things, haven't had a public hearing process.
I think we should work on the text here as quickly as possible, the text that we're changing. If we do that first, hopefully we get that out of the way, and then if someone comes in, they want, well, we've already included that, as soon as we get this passed, you'll be fine. But if we can get the text written first, then I think a lot of these problems will take care of themselves.
And the text is before you, and it's been posted on our website, so that would be the point of our discussions moving forward with regards to the text, would be that document.
So what's the process for getting that approved then? Right, we have it. That has to go out to public hearing?
Public hearing,
Okay.
just like we do a typical text amendment. So we would brief you, as we always do, request to go to public hearing, host a public hearing, hear comment. If you'd like to incorporate any of the additional comment that you've heard into the text, we would do that, and then it would be adopted and put in our code. But we would have to put the maps would have to be in place, not for the I-1 and I-2, because we already have that, but for C1, C2, and C3, we would have to have a map ready.
Before the public hearing?
No, you could do it after. We could do a map change afterwards, but that way we don't have a map to apply because it hasn't been mapped on the ground yet.
Linda, you can't do it afterwards. Because if you do it afterwards, people have
Mr. Schaefer,
no zone.
you can't
Sorry.
do that.
You have no zone.
You still can't do it.
All right, well, so what's the plan then to get this stuff to public input? I mean, the sooner it goes out to hearing, the sooner we're gonna hear from anything that's been passed, right?
I agree. So you're saying the text is ready to go,
Yes, I mean,
but the map is not?
yes.
Yeah, we've had the
Well, the
text.
maps are already staff-wise, but we haven't, that's what the part of the launching of that website is, and to finalize the maps and make sure you all were good with this process before we initiated anything more publicly.
So all of the texts, all the zoning districts texts are completed
For the
now?
commercial
No, for
industrial
just
employment campus,
commercial
yes.
industrial,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So,
Keeping in mind now that there, as you said, Doug, there are a lot of people that have been put on hold here. That's the, not that I want to rush the process, but there's some folks that are kind of
Well-
impatiently waiting now.
well, you're right, it costs them money too.
Right.
People could be bleeding thousands of dollars a month in carrying costs, and also, although I can understand the need for perhaps putting a brief deferral, maybe 90-day moratorium, to do it any longer than that, that denies our citizens of due process.
But if someone feels strongly enough and we take that moratorium off now, they may decide they can get it done in 90 days. Linda, you might be absolutely right. They may only get it done a month earlier, but that's their call, right? I mean, if they want to go through the process, I mean, the planning commission's there anyhow. We're here anyhow.
Right.
I mean, because at the end of 3 months, how do you say to somebody, you know, we really thought it would? I mean, how many times do we think we were really close on some of this stuff? And a lot of people thought we were passing the Freedom Plan a year ago. Me being one of them. So I just.
I want to ask, respectfully ask a question of the board here. We have difficult jobs because when you go to college, you get your degree, whether it's in economics, business, engineering, teaching, we're not taught these things, and it's hard to be experts on everything. And I think it'd be very valuable to understand some of the concerns or objections that might, at least today, maybe again at another meeting, coming from the private sector. I think it'd be very valuable to have one of our legacy attorneys to come up to this table and explain to us why we can't do the maps afterwards. I'd like to know why. It would be valuable to me to hear a private sector perspective. I don't think he's lobbying for any particular client. He's just saying, as a matter of policy, you can't do the maps later. I'd like to hear what Mr. Schaefer has to say. I think we should let him come up and give him a minute or two to explain that to us. It would be valuable to me.
How does the board feel about that? I mean, right now?
Yeah, I'd like to know, he had a comment that I think is pertinent to this process discussion. He's not lobbying for a client, he's just saying, look, here's why you can't do maps last. I would like to hear from the private sector why, so that we can take that into consideration when finalizing the process. It's important information. I think it would benefit us and our citizens to hear what he has to say.
Guys, all right,
I don't have a problem with it.
all right. Mr.
Coming
Schaefer,
up to
come
the-
to the microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
It's
President.
because if you adopt the text amendment, you eliminate the BNR and the BG and you replace it with C1, C2, C3. The minute you do that, if you don't change the map, I want to know what I can do with my property. I look at the map. The map says BG or BNR. But the text says C1, C2, C3. Never, never land. Never, never land. You have to do the maps either simultaneously, probably simultaneously. You have to do it simultaneously, the text and the map, because, for the reason I said, the map has to match the text. Because if you don't do it that way, you're going to have a map that doesn't track back to a text.
Sure, when we enact it right, but in the process of getting that information to make sure that we're getting things into the text amendments that we could take that through a hearing process and make sure that when we enact those two things, we enact them together, right?
You could do it simultaneously. You're now doing something that affects every citizen, as you know.
Yeah.
Believe me, there are some commercial property owners out there right now that are scouring that list. And they're seeing, just what you said earlier, is a hotel allowed? Is a landfill allowed? How's that difference from my existing BNR? This is a very difficult process. I'm going to pat this. I mean,
They've done a great job.
Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Very, very complex. Has a lot of moving parts, as Linda said. But you're going to get, I can guarantee you, a lot of specific comments about, how about adding a candy store to C2? I'm just using that.
Right.
How about subtracting hotels from C3?
A home for wayward attorneys, that kind of thing. Yes, right.
You're talking about every use out there. You're talking about what you can do with your property. Now, you know that a lot of people are not going to pay any attention, but 2 years from now, they're going to come in and say, how did that, you mean that's a permitted use in my neighborhood? But that's just a problem.
Right.
But
Fix that.
this is not gonna be an easy, fast process.
Yeah.
When you're changing all these uses, you're gonna get a lot, and you should get a lot of comment. And people, sure, this list has been published, and but people, when they look at these things, you're gonna get a lot of comments.
And I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Schaefer that we can adopt the maps later and the text would become effective upon adoption of the maps. I'll just point out that Prince George's County's been working on this for 6 years. They adopted their text, but it doesn't take effect till the maps are complete, which I think they've given themselves till 2020.
But wouldn't that be the same thing? I mean, that would just be
That's what I just said.
simultaneous adoption, right?
But we're saying that's already been.
But we're already,
We
right.
acknowledge that.
Right.
It's being done.
Okay, so I
Right,
don't.
but I'm just saying
I
that
don't
the
think
day
you're-
you adopt the text is not
Yeah, I don't
necessarily
think
Right,
you're
the
saying
okay.
different things,
Okay.
but
The
I think,
map.
but when
Gotcha.
they would become effective is gonna be at the same time.
Correct.
Right, which
Yes.
is what I think you're both
That
saying,
is
right.
correct.
Yeah.
So we don't have.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
You-
But
you
we don't want to be PG County.
Well, that's-
So, and then just
whole other
finally, the
discussion.
other point of consideration was grandfathering and the site plan's already in process. So during the zoning code review and public hearing, and again, these are just tentative timeframes, that plans may only be submitted and approved under the old code with 24 months to be approved. We worked very closely with Tom and Clay to develop what a grandfathering in, because in Maryland, you don't have what they call vested rights on your property for development until a footer is in the ground. So we could be changing our code and someone could have a site plan moving forward to do something, and we change the rules of engagement and they'd have to come back in and they're not conforming and they can't do that any longer. So we wanted to have this type of relief available with this grandfathering. And then following a new zoning code adoption, during the review of the zoning map amendments, that plans may be approved under the old code within 24 months to be approved, or plans may be submitted and processed but not approved under the new code, and that's key, that they can't be approved under the new code until it takes effect. But they could begin, if that new code is more agreeable to them, work under the new code. We just can't adopt anything or give them a building code or a building permit. And then following the adoption of the zoning map amendments, the new text becomes effective, and then plans may be submitted at this point only under the new code, then moving forward. So this is just a very simplified process that would be laid out, that we would also be asking for the board to take action in the form of a resolution to allow for this type of grandfathering, to give some assurance to the development community that may be in process of developing a site plan.
So if there's something I could do in BNR that I won't be able to do in see whatever I go to,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying I can still do that right now,
Yes.
even if I haven't started the project yet?
Correct. We would allow you to come in and get to, and Clay, do you want to explain their
that
process
make
a
sense?
little bit? Would be helpful?
You're talking about right now.
Basically 6 months to
Yeah.
start that.
The current zoning code, the process
Yeah.
allows for site plans to be submitted under the current uses that are prescribed for in the zoning code.
Okay.
Until they are changed and become effective, we would be working under the current zoning code. So we would allow plans to come in under that process or under that definitions that are still applicable, and the site plan would be reviewed under that current zoning code. And then it would go to the planning commission for concept, then final, and the planning commission would approve the final if it meets all requirements.
So let me play devil's advocate as opposed to being actually the devil himself, but if we had an assisted living place that wanted to go into a residential zone and it was clear that our new categories were not going to allow for that, that was something that we had moved forward with by virtue of the plan and said that wasn't appropriate. What we're saying here is get moving because you could get it approved under this grandfather?
Well, that's for, Wall Play.
I thought that you, I
The
thought we
current
did something to
zoning code
prevent
right
that.
now
Right.
allows the processing of that package to begin. So that was one of the provisions of the grandfathering, was to allow that to continue.
Right.
Certainly, the grandfathering, if that's not where the commissioners want to go, that certainly is something that could be thought about.
Right.
But that was what would allow the development community
To
to
keep moving
continue to
forward.
process a project that was in compliance with the county zoning ordinance.
So if we had something that, let's say we, by the grace of God, get these things passed and they're out there by May 31st, and someone hasn't submitted a site plan, why would we want to grandfather in their ability to develop something that was not in that plan? I understand if something's been processed or been financed or a site plan's been submitted or they're underway. I get that. But why would we want another window of opportunity to do something beyond what would then be the existing code? You know what I'm saying?
Well, they
Yes,
can't.
I know what you're saying.
Once
No, no,
once
this
the
says
cone,
for 24 months they could.
No, what it's saying
No,
is,
that's-
is that
it's before we adopt. Once we've adopted the new code, they can only
Once
go
it's-
in what the new code is.
once the plan's adopted,
Okay.
the maps are adopted, you have to submit under the new stuff.
Okay.
Yes.
But what it's saying, if you submit now, under
Okay.
the old, you have 24 months to get that plan through.
Whether we've adopted the new code or not,
So-
because you submitted it now.
And the
But once
reason
the
on
new
the
code's
24
adopted,
months
you can't
is
do
that
that.
is, our process can take
That
18
long.
So you're saying at that point they
24
would
months.
be midstream?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me go back to Commissioner Howard's question, because it's been asked, that exact example has been brought up to me by a couple of people. You know, one of the things that I have concerns about is this idea of building, a 125 unit home in medium density. I thought that we agreed to some procedural changes a month or two ago that would prevent that, didn't we? I thought you were shaking
It was
your head.
put in the Freedom Plan for the residential as a land use definition to not have PUDs and maybe one of the tenets of the land use definitions and in the Freedom Plan, but we have not changed zoning. We haven't gotten to the residential zoning yet. So that would be considered in the residential zoning.
To go to Commissioner Hart's question then, until the next board adopts, this aberration can continue to occur in medium density. We can have high density units being built in medium density then.
We don't have a new code for that, correct?
So so this brings us back to another question we discussed 6 months ago. Could we do this quicker in stages? Knock out the commercial and industrial, the text is written, immediately go to medium density residential and fix that one, and adopt that and reflect them on the map, and do it in phase stages, maybe leaving agriculture for last.
And that is the game plan.
That's what we're
That's
doing.
what we're doing, okay.
Yeah.
But, so what is, so in timeframe, what is the earliest you think we could make all that happen for both commercial and medium-density residential?
Well, again, the commercial's in your hands, so that's up to you how quickly you want to move forward with regards to commercial, industrial, and employment campus. The residential is currently being drafted. Now that the Freedom Plan is done, we've been moving much more quickly. That would be one of the considerations for the residential text as we move forward with that. So we're moving forward in that direction.
How long would it take to put the properties on the map?
For which?
Commercial.
Commercial,
It's already, we have that.
and zone, and industrial? You have
All
that?
done.
That's
It's
all
all
done.
done.
So we have the properties
Yep.
on the map, we have the
Planning's seen that.
thing written.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Planning's already seen that.
And the text is done.
And
The text is
So
done.
we're ready to move to public hearing on commercial.
Well, I mean, I would think we would want to review the text a few times
With you guys
with
first.
you all
Okay.
Yeah, that was
before
the purpose of
we,
giving
to
us
make
to
sure
tweak some
again,
of that,
and
in case there was something we found that we didn't necessarily
Correct.
agree with.
But that certainly can come to you guys soon.
mhm.
All right.
So I'm gonna regress back to my original question. If a commercial property owner has a large tract of land, a large parcel of land,
Yes.
if a property owner, commercial property owner has a large tract of land, and let's say the maximum building size is 100,000 square feet, how many buildings can he build? 1, 2, 5?
It's by use.
It's by use. So he could build multiple buildings.
Mhm.
Okay. Does it state that in the code?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Fine. Thank you.
and we've talked about the mapping tool. So again, some of the next steps are, if you all would like to do resolutions, our suggestion would be to do resolutions regarding zoning, text and map amendment deferrals and grandfathering for future site plans, that we have some work sessions with regard to the actual text, and then we begin the map portion. We're currently working on drafting the residential districts. We've been working with our focus groups, so that's been moving forward quickly. And then the next, I think the biggest component of all of this will be doing an ag conservation zone study. Our ag district is a catch-all for everything. I think we need to really sit down and determine with a larger group what we want that ag zone to look like, if it makes sense to make some changes with regards to ag and what we allow in it. And I know you all gave us an 18-month time frame, so we're working as quickly as we can to accomplish this. So with that, that's all I have for you today. Sorry to slack here.
What is the next step? What is the next step, and when will it happen?
Really, again, if you choose to do the resolutions, we'd like to come back to you on the 29th to have a further discussion on that.
And the resolutions would be to do what?
The deferral for the zoning text and the map amendment changes, as well as to put a grandfathering of future site plans in place.
And
We'd like to do that on the 29th if possible. Just so it could give some assurances to the public as to here we are now and this is where we're moving toward. And then we would begin to schedule work sessions with the board, if you so choose, to work through, just going through, like we did with our teams, page by page on the zoning code.
And then we go to public hearing, and then.
Right. So work sessions meaning staff and us?
Yes.
With the planning commission or not?
No, this is in your hands. So it would just be staff.
But suppose we want to make a change that should be
That's
run
okay.
through planning as well. Wouldn't it make sense to, because we're talking about shortening this process so that we can get moving here, or would that not be the way
I don't think that would be shortening the process. I think it's in your hands now. They've recommended it. I mean, unless you were to completely scrap something altogether. But again, you do have the latitude to make adjustments to what we have coming before you. And I would suggest that it would be us and members of the concept team that meet with you all.
That's fine. I just, because of the fact that this is so complicated, I would, that would be a suggestion to make sure that everybody's on the same page. That's all.
Maybe you could have a couple work sessions and then plan a joint meeting with them just to review what you come up with.
I think that'd be a smart idea.
Yeah, well, they've suggested a joint meeting anyway.
Right. Probably good if you did a little bit of work on this stuff first, though, right? So you get into it.
Instead of trying to make changes together,
Yes.
this is, because it's in our hands now, we could suggest that those changes be made, and then.
I mean, as you know, you're gonna have new board members. You're gonna have a budget process. You got a huge learning curve.
Right.
It would be really good if this piece could get out to the public before you're knee deep in that budget process, so that process could be working.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's hard to envision that time frame, right?
It's hard to be pleasure.
Yeah.
But if you started that process, you could at least, maybe get that back out to the public while you're dealing with the budget or whatever.
So let's have you back here on the 29th.
Yes, if that works,
yeah.
then we would appreciate that.
Let's put her on the
You're going to
schedule
see a lot of us
for
coming.
the 29th, so we can continue this moving forward as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that brief presentation.
I'm still here. Can't get rid of me yet.
And now we're going on to Mount Airy Annexation number 42, Dorseytown.
Well, and before
No?
yes,
Oh.
but before we do, it's being recommended that the forecast is getting worse. Now snow is supposed to continue until 4 a.m.
4 a.m.?
and they're looking at 5 to 8 inches.
What happened to that skiff and
ice.
half inch?
It's going.
What?
Ice and
I mean, it's not going,
ice
it's
as it
here.
gets- icy conditions as it gets later. So transit is stopping running at 1, and others are recommending that we close at the same time.
At 1? For like 11:50 myself.
Go put Claire. Go put Claire.
So if that's the case, I don't know what,
It's 11:53.
I don't know.
I want
what's-
to be out of here already.
I don't know what schedules are like, but perhaps we would consider throwing in another session prior to the Thanksgiving break.
On the Tuesday.
Yep.
Can't
Can't
do
do it.
Tuesday. Can we do the Tuesday after Thanksgiving?
Doug, I have a
I don't
sample.
know.
Let me look
Can
at
I go
it.
get my calendar first?
Sure.
I'll
You
be
should
back.
always have your calendar with you.
I hate to bring the phone in here because so many people are trying to get hold of me.
You are quite the celebrity.
Tuesday,
So that would be the 27th.
27th, Doug. That's the day of the LTAC presentation. Maybe we could do an afternoon presentation.
The LTAC's at night, right?
LTAC's at
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
No, we'd go an afternoon session and then go right to the LTAC presentation. So we don't have to be here anyway.
Although we have almost a
27.
day's worth of stuff here, don't we?
27, I would suggest doing it in the morning. Why don't we have an AM session?
I
Is
can
there-
do that. I can do it.
I'm booked.
Can you rearrange your schedule? This is kind of
20th.
important.
Is this before you're out of town or you're out of town?
Before.
I have one conflict that I can reschedule.
Yeah, me too.
In the morning of the 27th.
That's for start.
Morning
5
and
a.m.
afternoon. Can you make morning or afternoon? Either one of the
I
two?
have
Is it stuff
pretty
that
solid
can
all day.
possibly be rescheduled? It's 2 weeks away.
How about
You can't do anything on the 20th, though.
10:30, 11?
Yeah.
Kick it in there.
Dick City could make 10:30?
11. 11. I
11?
can't make it back that time.
So can we go 11 to 4?
But we could probably, I mean, you don't care about, not that you don't care about, there's probably some stuff we could put on there that would be more ministerial, at least to start. If we had discussion items, maybe hold them to the latter part of the session.
Well, yeah, because obviously this afternoon,
And
we've got
Commissioner
schedules
Fraser's
gonna
going to
have
be
to
with
get
me
pushed.
that morning.
Yeah.
One thing.
What day are we talking about now?
27th.
27th.
We've already canceled this one, so we have to.
Yeah, that helped.
I mean, that's about one of the only days it actually does work for me. I've got,
I mean, unless you,
We don't see what we're talking about here.
So can I tell staff we're closing at lunch?
Well, hang on a
Yes.
sec.
hold on.
Yes.
I can assure you, when I came from my, event with the Lieutenant Governor, his schedule was canceled for the rest of the day, because it's getting worse out there, and I had a tough time. So, I would concur if that's the case, because I don't think it's changing the rain.
Okay, 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock's good, yeah. So we're looking at having a session on the 27th
Yeah.
at 10?
Could we do 10, and then you guys, if you said you can be here at 10:30,
We should.
Try to, yeah.
Well,
can we do some of these things that
Yeah, I
we're
think
gonna
we
not
can do
have
it
to
10.
do this afternoon?
Yeah, that's,
Prior to you guys getting here, and then we can roll with the rest of these things that are important for the 5 of us to be here.
yeah, okay.
we go 12 to 4. I mean, 10 to 4.
Well,
Oh, I don't think we'll have to go that
we don't
long.
have to go that long,
10
Rich, I don't think so.
It doesn't really matter, because we got to be here for the LTAC meeting. So, I mean,
Well-
I would just as soon start later and end later and then go
Well-
to the LTAC. Otherwise, you're sitting around here for 2 hours waiting for the LTAC meeting.
Yeah,
I don't know
have other
who's
stuff.
going, but
I've
Actually, I have other stuff.
actually got I've got to be in Baltimore at 5 that evening
Oh,
for
okay.
an award for my daughter, so I can't, I'm
Okay,
not
no, I
gonna be at
understand. Okay,
LTAC,
that's
so.
fine. Okay, that's fine. So, okay, so we're
We
talking
get
about
a
a morning and
couple
an
hours.
afternoon session then, are
Let's
we
go
talking
10
about?
till 10 to 1. Let's go 3 hours then.
well, yeah. I'm
We'll see what's on the
sure that's-
schedule.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, Why don't we
I'm
say
sure that
10 to, why
Friday
don't we say
night
10 to 2,
I'd like to be
because
able
it's
to
gonna be
pass.
our last, just to make sure we don't squeeze ourselves, I mean, and we can always end it early.
I know you, because it's your last one, you would be here the whole time, never leave.
Well,
Our
I
last
do.
one's actually the 29th.
29th, yeah.
Well,
I'll
yeah, but
cancel
we're gonna
that
be
one.
dealing
But
with.
the last time that the 5 of us are gonna be here.
Steve won't be here the
The
29th.
29th,
Right.
unfortunately, so maybe we could,
You didn't get that on your
And,
calendar?
and that
Cancel.
raises an interesting question. Should we move the
To have Steve removed.
the monocracy discussion to the 27th, when you'll be here?
I would be fine with that.
Okay.
Sure.
And that means we have to talk to the river board and get them to come out.
Well, that gives us a little time to do that, so that's
And it
not
gives
all
us a little
bad.
more time, Rich, than trying to throw things into the mix here.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
good, Steve, I'm good. You were good to us on the Freedom Plan.
Okay.
I wanna,
And I appreciate that, so.
I wanna be
Okay.
reciprocate, but also don't want to be bamboozled.
We're on the same page,
I know.
okay?
Thanks.
All right.
All right.
So do you want to do this now?
Yeah.
Is this
It'll
going to
take
take
like 5
long?
minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
We promise, 5 minutes or less, no questions.
Go.
Move on.
Ready?
Morning.
Except
Really?
for that last part.
I'm here to introduce Mount Airy Annexation Number 42, Dorseytown. It was submitted by the town of Mount Airy on October 3rd, and this is the plat that was submitted with it. It's a total of 20 parcels, and that is equaling 12.6 acres. It includes Ellis Road, if you follow the cursor, and also North Main Street, Maryland 808A. This is a map showing the entire town of Mount Airy. The black indicates the corporate limits. The yellow and black dashed line is the municipal growth area, and the annexation is outlined in blue. To the west here is Frederick County. We have the same map at a larger scale, and you can tell everything that's hashed is in the corporate limits, so it's pretty much surrounded by the town of Mount Airy. An aerial view of the property. The municipal growth area, once again, is the black and yellow line. To the north of the property is Mount Airy Baptist Church. To the east is Vestry of St. James Church, and to the west is Summit Ridge subdivision. The county zoning is currently R40,000. Adjoining property in the town is zoned R2, which Mount Airy zoning code, that's roughly 1 unit per 16,000 square feet. A zoning waiver is being requested. Like I said, the county zoning is currently R40,000. Because the town's proposed R2 zoning is 50% more dense than the current county zoning, the town's requesting a zoning waiver. The designated land use is a low-density residential in the town's 2013 comprehensive master plan. We asked for agency comments, and we received one from the Carroll County Bureau of Engineering. They are recommending that the town take over maintenance and ownership of Ellis Road from North Main Street, Maryland 808, and to where the town limits currently end. We also received...
Did the town say anything about that? Are they willing to take over the maintenance of that road?
We have not forwarded these comments
Okay.
to them yet, so once that
All right.
occurs, we'll know.
Us first, then.
We also received a comment from SHA. There are no projects directly affecting this annexation that's in the CTP or the highway needs inventory. They did acknowledge that there is a highway needs inventory project located along Maryland 27 from North Main to the Frederick County line, and they recommend that the town consider safety impacts and capacity impacts if 808 is used as an alternative route. We were in front of Planning Commission on November 13th, and they are forwarding this annexation request to you with a favorable recommendation, with the condition that the town takes over the maintenance of Ellis Road, of course. We're not asking for any action today. We'll be back before you on November 29th, recommending what the Planning Commission had forwarded to you. We'll ask that you sign and forward a comment letter to the town and approve the zoning waiver with the same condition. Were there any questions?
Question.
Yeah.
If they annex, that's basically North Main Street, I'm not sure, I think there are some homes that are on wells on North Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
Will they in any way, shape, or form be forced to hook up to town water if they're currently on well and septic?
There's no lines going there, so again, I believe the same as the county, until there's a project to bring water lines there.
Well, there is. Leisure Harris. I just want to make
That
sure.
would be up to the town's determination.
I just want to make sure that if we do this, and maybe you can talk to the town about that, we protect those, there's maybe a half dozen houses, we protect those houses and make it clear that if we approve this annexation, they will not require force those people to hook up against their will. Because there will be water and sewer going up North Main Street for Leisure Harrison in the very near future. Gentlemen, you all right with that?
That could be part of your comment letter.
You know, I think that makes sense to make sure that.
But they are allowed to hook up if they desire to.
Oh, sure, but I don't want to force them to hook up because it costs them $20,000.
Yes,
Right.
not
No, I
required
agree with that.
until they-
Okay, so that would be a condition of any approval that we not force them to hook up against their will. They would have the option, but not a mandate.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Are we going to do minutes and agendas, or we want to get out of here?
It's up to you guys.
Yeah, might as well do it. I mean,
All right, move on to minutes.
I don't have any public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't give
I want to do minutes first. Minutes, October
Mr.
10th.
Snow? Go ahead.
Minutes, October 10th at 3 p.m.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thursday, October 11th at 10 a.m. These are a little longer. It's almost like hours.
Got anything yet?
No.
Move to
Motion.
approve.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
And I abstain.
one abstention, okay. Public comment.
Hi, yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. And my name is Mary Kowalski. And, you know, I just want to be a voice, maybe just a little voice. It reminds me of, oh, who was that author? And wrote about the Who's. You know, they live on this little tiny
Dr. Seuss? Yeah.
Dr. Zeus, thank you. And they're just saying, we are here, and they're totally ignored. Nobody listens, and I'm concerned about the people of South Carroll. First of all, North Carroll. I was at the Board of Ed meeting yesterday evening. North Carroll's been hit hard with school closures, and we need to push back against that. We're going to have 3 people on the Board of Ed now from that area. We've got to get some justice for those people. I think they're being shafted, and they've been hit hard with that. South Carroll's being hit very hard, and they've been hit hard for many, many years with this unbridled, uncontrolled growth. And we've got to push back against that. But it's like, we are here, and nobody listens. Nobody in positions of power listen. You all adopted this freedom plan October 10. You know, you cut corners. You admit that openly. You're rushing things. You're cutting corners because we've got 2 people with term limits that are going to be out in December. Well, government has to follow the law, too. Government isn't exempt from following the law, just like the ordinary citizens. You can't cut corners if it means breaking the law. And I'm concerned about that. You know, I was just talking to a gentleman down on Route 32 and Benton. He said, oh my gosh, he said, I can't find a pen fast enough to sign something to stop what they're doing. He says he's an early riser. People have to wait for the light to change 3 times before they can go through the light at that corner. And you all want to you passed it in October 10. You want to put some kind of humongous, high-density commercial development in addition to what's already been zoned for that area. This is all new, okay? It's new high density. Right on that road? Come on, folks. You know, people are dying on Route 26. It's insanity. So we filed, there's approximately 14 people that have filed as plaintiffs they're challenging what you did when you adopted that law because you cut corners. Government doesn't get to do that, and we're challenging it. And so you need to put a hold on this whole zoning thing you're doing because you need the comprehensive plans in place first. So let's slow down, get the horse before the cart,
Thank you.
and stop cutting corners.
Thank you.
So Commissioners, Mr. President, I just want to say, one of the things I'm most proud of this board for, and I thank all four of you, is the bravery you exhibited in taking this plan back from the Planning Commission, the Freedom Plan, and taking all of the residential high density out of the plan, so that there was no new residential high density in the plan anywhere, and that was a direct result of all of us taking that plan back because the Planning Commission was going the other direction. And I've got nothing but positive feedback from all the people of Eldersburg who are very happy with the fact that we
No,
stripped
that's
all
not
that.
Sorry,
true.
this is
And
not question
medium
and answer.
density
Thank
is
you.
not okay.
Stop.
Medium
You had your-
density
you
is
had
not
your-
okay either.
you had your 3 minutes.
You allowed the developer's attorney to get up and talk. I think you need to let
And
an
we've heard
ordinary
from you
citizen
twice,
do that.
Ms. Kowalski, and you don't like to hear from other people. But as the mayor of Whoville, let me tell you something. No laws were broken, no corners were cut, and the fact is, the reason we took that plan back over was to take the density out of the plan, and see, people seem to ignore that fact. So, you know, it would be nice if people would get their facts straight before they say things, and the fact is, it was that very action that was designed to protect the community from the growth. Go look at the plan, that's the fact, Mayor.
And that is the fact. Thank you,
Okay.
Commissioner Howard.
Okay, let's move on to agendas. Tuesday, November 20th, 1 o'clock, solar array project ribbon cutting ceremony at Hoods Mill Solar Field, Commissioners Frazier and Wance. At 2 o'clock, we had the Veterans Advisory Meeting in WVW, Post 467, Commissioner Weaver in Westminster. 6:15, speaking engagement with Commissioner Frazier at Westminster Aquinas Club. We are closed Thursday and Friday for Thanksgiving, and the Commissioner's report that week is Commissioner Weaver. We move on to Tuesday, November 27th, which will be changed. How would I just say that? And just leave it at that for right now with
That's
what's
good.
on there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Wednesday, November 28th, Human Services Program groundbreaking ceremony reception at 3 o'clock in Westminster, Commissioner Frazier. We have our meeting on Thursday, the 29th. We're having, again, talking about Mountain Area Annexation Number 42 at Dorseytown. We have a public hearing on financial assurance plan. We have a public hearing on code changes for Chapter 151 and 152. We'll have a zoning text amendment for reducing required BZA newspaper advertising for the Board of Zoning hearings from 2 to 1. We'll have FY19 Carroll Transit System replacement bus purchase. I guess we'll be talking about that. Have a bid approval for hydrojet cleaning FSK Force Main. We have a bid approval for sewage improvements in Warfield Section 1. Bid approval for change order to provide expanded construction management services in the Department of Public Works. We have a bid approval for gaming square improvements. A bid approval for Excella land management system. We'll have a discussion about the Veterans Advisory Council and Veterans Shuttle. On Saturday, December 1st, University System of Maryland Holiday Open House in Baltimore with Commissioner Wance at 5 p.m. and the Commissioner's report that week, Commissioner Frazier.
And just so you guys know, there were a couple of things on here that we're looking to take some action on. You were going to get the story behind those this afternoon, so you'll get them on the 27th. That's not to sort of sneak something in at the end. I want you to see it ahead of time, but that was why those decisions were on there.
And I'll try to move anything that's really decisional to the 27th, probably the decision on today's public hearing and other things, so that all five of you are the things like bid approvals and things that are the normal course, we'll try to move as much to the 29th, except for maybe.
So the balance of today's agenda will go to the 27th,
Right,
and then we're going to add the monocacy.
right. And then
Just
the.
possible vote, Steve? Possible vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
the,
that's fine.
I would suggest you go, not moratorium, grandfathering and the resolutions that Linda talked about today, instead of the 29th, one commissioner isn't going to be here, do that on the 27th as well.
Let's find out how he's going to vote first. And then we can decide if that's a good idea. Yeah, no, that's
Wait a
fine.
minute, did you say something about sneaking something?
I did, but yeah, that was just to create a diversion.
So trying to move it,
Yeah.
anything that's it's really already decided when you do your budget to the 29 and things that are more, unusual to the 22nd.
All right,
Gotcha.
fine.
All right.
Really quick, I just wanted to say that Lieutenant Governor was at Carroll Access Carroll this morning, which is why I was absent for a little period of time. Nothing but good things to say about that facility over there. Interesting, Doug, for you, he brought up some transportation things that he would like to see, and that would include enhancing our ability to take people to physicians' appointments and things like that. So certainly with that comes a price tag, and he knows that. But I think there'll be some discussions from the state level down on that very thing. And I mentioned to him about our veteran shuttle, and he said, "Oh, we know about that," and we're very, 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 very impressed with that. So it's great dialogue. All the players were at the table this morning, so we just wanted to give kudos to everybody. Access Carroll is something that no other jurisdiction in the state has. So, we sit here and listen to all this stuff, but the good stuff certainly comes up to the level that it should. So
Sure.
I want to thank you for going here representing the Board of Commissioners on short notice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Mr. President, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.